My daughter-in-law posted RIP grandma memes on social media while I was perfectly healthy, so I commented right back, "Thanks for the heads up. Just updated my will." Now she's crying at my doorstep, begging me not to leave everything to charity. The whole nightmare started 3 months ago on what should have been a peaceful Tuesday morning. I was sitting in my favorite armchair, the burgundy leather one I'd bought after my husband Frank passed 2 years ago, sipping my second cup of coffee and scrolling through Facebook. At 62, I'd finally gotten the hang of social media, mostly to keep up with my son Marcus and see photos of my grandchildren. The morning sun was streaming through the lace curtains I'd inherited from my own mother, casting gentle patterns across the hardwood floors of my modest ranch house in Cedar Falls, Iowa. I'd served 22 years in the Army, retiring as a master sergeant, and Frank had been career Navy. We'd saved every penny, invested wisely, and by the time I hung up my uniform, we owned our home outright, plus a decent nest egg. Frank's life insurance and my military pension meant I was comfortable, not wealthy, but certainly secure enough to help family when needed. The house itself wasn't fancy, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, built in 1978, but it was paid for and held 40 years of memories. That morning, I was checking on a post from my neighbor Helen about her new rose bushes when I saw it. A shared meme on my daughter-in-law Vanessa's profile. The image was a cartoon of an elderly woman with angel wings and a halo, captioned, "When Grandma finally goes to heaven and stops nagging everyone." Underneath, Vanessa had written, "Some people just need to accept their time is up. Sorry, not sorry." Amly truth, my coffee mug froze halfway to my lips. I read it again, certain I was misunderstanding something. The meme had been posted at 11:47 p.m. the night before, and already had 6 likes and 3 laughing face reactions. I clicked on the comments. Vanessa's sister Ashley had written, "OMG, yes, some old people just don't know when to step aside." Another friend had added, "Preach, girl. Life's too short to deal with toxic elders." I set my coffee down with shaking hands. Vanessa Rodriguez had married my son Marcus 3 years ago in a wedding I'd helped pay for. I'd contributed $8,000 toward their reception, bought her wedding dress when her own mother claimed she couldn't afford it, and spent weeks helping her plan every detail from centerpieces to seating charts. She was 28, worked part-time at a dental office, and had moved into the small apartment above my detached garage after they got married because they couldn't afford their own place yet. Marcus worked as a mechanic at Thompson's Auto, repair downtown, making decent money but nothing spectacular. They'd been talking about buying their own house, having children, building a future. I'd been supportive, even offering to help with a down payment when the time came. Vanessa had always been polite to my face, calling me Mom Ruth and bringing me little gifts on holidays. She'd seemed grateful for the garage apartment, which I let them live in rent-free. But this meme wasn't polite. It wasn't grateful. It was cruel, calculated, and clearly directed at someone specific. Given that I was the only grandmother in their immediate circle, the only elder who might be considered part of their daily lives, the target seemed obvious. I screenshot the post, my military training kicking in automatically. Document everything. Then I kept scrolling through Vanessa's recent activity. What I found made my stomach turn. Over the past month, she'd shared or liked dozens of similar posts. Memes about toxic family members, articles about cutting off negative relatives, and inspirational quotes about choosing your own family. One particularly nasty share from 2 weeks ago showed a photo of an empty rocking chair with the caption, "Sometimes the best family gatherings are the ones where certain people are finally absent." Each post had engagement from her friends, people I'd met at family barbecues and holiday dinners, people who knew exactly who she was talking about. They were all laughing along, adding their own stories about difficult in-laws and burdensome relatives. It was like discovering a secret club where I was the main topic of ridicule. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Morning, Mom. Van and I are thinking of coming by for dinner Sunday. She wants to try making your pot roast recipe. Hope that's okay. I stared at the message for a long time. My pot roast recipe, the one I'd learned from my grandmother, perfected during 22 years of cooking for Frank, and shared with Vanessa just last month when she claimed she wanted to learn family traditions. The same Vanessa who was apparently posting about how I needed to accept my time was up. Another scroll through her profile revealed more disturbing patterns. She'd started following several accounts focused on inheritance law, estate planning, and elder care. Her liked posts included articles about when aging parents become a burden and how to handle stubborn seniors who won't listen to reason. One particularly chilling save was titled, "Legal Rights of Adult Children When Elderly Parents Make Bad Decisions." The picture was becoming clearer, and it wasn't pretty. This wasn't just casual complaining about an annoying mother-in-law. This felt systematic, like she was building a case, gathering support, and possibly even researching her options for what came next. I thought back to recent interactions, looking for signs I'd missed. Last month, Vanessa had asked seemingly innocent questions about my finances. "Mom Ruth, do you have everything organized? Like, if something happened, would Marcus know where to find your important papers?" At the time, I'd thought she was being thoughtful, maybe worried about my age catching up with me. Now I wondered if she was fishing for information. There had been other incidents too. 2 weeks ago, she'd made a comment about the size of my house. "It's so much space for just one person. Don't you ever think about downsizing? You could get a nice little apartment and have money left over for travel or hobbies." When I'd mentioned that I loved my home and had no intention of leaving, her smile had seemed forced. Just last week, she'd brought up the topic of wills. Marcus's friend Jake just had to deal with his grandmother's estate, and it was such a mess because she didn't have everything properly documented. "You do have a will, right, Mom Ruth?" I'd confirmed that yes, I had a will, and she'd pressed for details about whether it was recent, whether I'd used a lawyer, whether Marcus knew the contents. Again, I'd assumed she was being responsible, thinking ahead about family planning. Now those conversations took on a sinister tone. It seemed like Vanessa wasn't just venting about an annoying in-law online. She was actively planning for my absence, possibly even hoping to accelerate it. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This young woman, whom I'd welcomed into my family, supported financially, and treated like the daughter I'd never had, was essentially wishing for my death. Not just wishing for it, but advertising that wish to her social circle and recruiting them to agree with her. I got up from my chair and walked to the kitchen window that overlooked the garage apartment. Vanessa's car was gone. She usually left for work around 10 a.m., but Marcus's truck was still there. He worked the afternoon shift on Tuesdays, so he was probably still sleeping after staying up late watching sports with his buddies. Part of me wanted to march out there and confront them both immediately, demand explanations, wave my phone around showing the evidence, and get this resolved right now. But my military experience had taught me patience, strategy, and the value of gathering complete intelligence before making any moves. Instead, I made myself another cup of coffee and settled in for a thorough investigation of what exactly I was dealing with. I created a new document on my laptop and began cataloging every concerning post, comment, and interaction I could find. Screenshots, dates, context, building a case file like I used to do when documenting disciplinary issues in the service. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. Vanessa hadn't just started this campaign recently. Going back 6 months, I found subtle but consistent patterns of disrespect disguised as humor or concern. Shares about difficult family dynamics, likes on posts about setting boundaries with toxic relatives, and comments agreeing with friends who complained about their own in-laws. One comment from 4 months ago particularly stung. Under a friend's rant about a demanding mother-in-law, Vanessa had written, "Girl, I feel you. Some people act like the world owes them something just because they're older. like sorry, but your generation had your turn. Time to step aside and let the rest of us live our lives without constant judgment and interference. The friend had responded, exactly. And they wonder why we don't visit more often. Vanessa's reply. Right? I swear some days I just fantasize about total freedom. From all that drama. Life would be so much simpler. I had to close my laptop and take several deep breaths. This wasn't just casual venting between friends. This was systematic character assassination, emotional abuse disguised as social media entertainment. And it had been going on for months, while she smiled to my face and accepted my help. The cruelest part was the timing. Frank had been gone for 2 years, and I was still adjusting to life alone. I'd been grateful for Marcus and Vanessa's presence in the garage apartment, thinking it was nice to have family close by. I'd enjoyed having Vanessa around, someone to chat with over coffee, someone to teach cooking techniques and family stories to. I genuinely believed we were building a relationship. Instead, she'd apparently been counting down the days until she wouldn't have to pretend anymore. My doorbell rang, startling me out of my dark thoughts. Through the peephole, I could see Helen from next door holding a casserole dish. Helen was 75, a widow like me, and we'd become close friends since Frank's passing. She helped me with my garden, and I helped her with anything requiring a stepladder or heavy lifting. Ruth, honey, I brought you some of that chicken and rice casserole you liked, Helen said when I opened the door. Made too much again, you. Know how it is. I invited her in, grateful for the distraction and the company. Helen had known Frank and me since we'd moved to this neighborhood 15 years ago. She'd been at Marcus's high school graduation, his wedding, Frank's funeral. She was practically family. You look upset, dear, Helen observed as she followed me to the kitchen. Everything all right? I hesitated, then decided I needed perspective from someone I trusted. Helen, can I show you something and get your honest opinion? I pulled up Vanessa's Facebook profile on my laptop and showed Helen the recent memes and posts. Helen put on her reading glasses and studied the screen carefully, her expression growing more serious with each post. Oh my, she said finally. Oh, Ruth, this is really nasty stuff. Am I overreacting? I asked. Maybe it's just generational humor? Maybe I'm being too sensitive? Helen shook her head firmly. Honey, I've got 3 daughters-in-law and 6 grandchildren. I know the difference between harmless teasing and outright cruelty. This girl is being vicious, and she's doing it publicly, where all her friends can see and join in. She scrolled back through some of the older posts. And look at this pattern. This isn't venting frustration. This is character assassination. Having Helen confirm my worst fears was both validating and heartbreaking. I wasn't being paranoid or oversensitive. This was real, it was deliberate, and it was designed to hurt me. The question is, Helen continued, what are you going to do about it? Because, sweetheart, you can't just pretend you didn't see this. This level of disrespect doesn't get better on its own. It gets worse. I nodded, feeling something shift inside me. The hurt and shock were crystallizing into something harder, more determined. I'd spent 22 years in the Army dealing with people who thought they could walk all over others without consequences. I'd handled insubordination, disrespect, and backstabbing before. This might be family, but the principle was the same. Helen stayed for another hour, helping me document more of Vanessa's social media activity and discussing potential responses. By the time she left, I had a clearer picture of what I was dealing with and the beginnings of a plan. That evening, I called my lawyer. Gerald Hutchins had been my attorney for 12 years, ever since Frank and I first drafted our wills after his heart attack scare. Gerald was in his mid-50s, a former Marine himself, and he understood military families. His office was in downtown Cedar Falls, in one of those converted Victorian houses that gave the business district its charm. I'd called him Tuesday evening and scheduled an appointment for Thursday morning telling his secretary only that I needed to discuss some estate planning updates. I arrived at his office 15 minutes early, carrying a manila folder thick with printed screenshots and notes. Gerald's receptionist, Mrs. Patterson, offered me coffee while I waited in the familiar leather chairs of his waiting room. The walls were decorated with certificates and photos from Gerald's own military service, along with pictures of his family and his boat. It was the kind of office that made you feel like you were talking to someone who understood sacrifice and service. Gerald welcomed me into his inner office promptly at 9 o'clock. He was a tall man with graying temples and the kind of steady handshake that inspired confidence. His desk was organized but not obsessively neat, with family photos positioned so clients could see them, a reminder that he was a husband and father himself, not just a legal advisor. "Ruth, good to see you," he said, gesturing for me to take a seat in one of the client chairs across from his desk. "Mrs. Patterson said you wanted to discuss some estate planning matters. I hope everything's all right with your health?" "My health is fine, Gerald. It's my family situation that's become complicated." I opened my folder and spread out the printed screenshots across his desk. "I need to show you something, and I need your professional advice about how to handle it." Gerald put on his reading glasses and began examining the documents. I watched his expression shift from casual interest to concern, then to something resembling anger. He was quiet for several minutes, methodically going through each screenshot, reading the comments and replies. "Ruth," he said finally, looking up at me over his glasses, "how long has this been going on?" I only discovered it 3 days ago, but based on what I found, it's been building for at least 6 months, maybe longer. I pulled out a timeline I'd created, showing the progression of posts from subtle complaints to outright hostility. "She's been living in my garage apartment rent-free for 3 years. I paid for part of her wedding, helped her with groceries. When money was tight, included her in every family gathering. And this is how she really feels about me." Gerald continued studying the evidence. He was particularly interested in the posts about inheritance law and elder care that Vanessa had liked or saved. "This suggests premeditation," he said, his voice taking on the professional tone I remembered from when he'd helped us navigate Frank's Veterans Administration benefits. "She's not just venting frustration, she's researching legal angles." "That's what worried me most," I admitted. The combination of wishing I was dead and simultaneously looking up information about inheritance rights and elder care decisions. "It feels like she's building toward something." Gerald nodded grimly. "In my experience, people don't research these topics casually. She's either planning to challenge your mental competency at some point, or she's trying to understand what legal rights she and Marcus might have to your assets." He leaned back in his chair. "Tell me about your current estate plan. What does Marcus stand to inherit?" I explained the basics of my will, drafted 2 years after Frank's death. Marcus was my sole heir, inheriting the house, my savings accounts, my life insurance policies, and my military pension survivor benefits. The total value was approximately $450,000. Not a fortune, but a substantial sum for a young couple starting out. "And Marcus has no idea about his wife's online behavior?" Gerald asked. "I don't believe so. Or if he does, he hasn't said anything to me about it." I pulled out my phone and showed Gerald the text Marcus had sent about coming for dinner Sunday. "He seems to think everything is normal between us." Gerald made some notes on a legal pad. "Ruth, I need to ask you some difficult questions, and I want you to think carefully before answering. First, do you believe Marcus is aware of and complicit in his wife's behavior, or do you think he's genuinely ignorant of what she's been posting?" I considered this carefully. Marcus had always been a straightforward kid, not given to deception or manipulation. If anything, he was sometimes too trusting, too willing to believe the best of people. I think he's genuinely unaware. Marcus isn't much of a social media user, and Vanessa could easily be hiding this from him. Second question, if Marcus knew about these posts, Do you believe he would defend his wife's behavior or be horrified by it? This was harder to answer. Marcus loved me, I was certain of that. But he also loved his wife, and loyalty to a spouse was important to him. I think he would be upset and confused. He might try to minimize it or make excuses, but I don't think he would defend it outright. Gerald nodded and made more notes. Third question. What outcome are you hoping for? Do you want to preserve your relationship with Marcus while addressing his wife's behavior, or are you prepared to potentially lose your relationship with both of them to protect yourself? This question hit me like a physical blow. The thought of losing Marcus, my only child, was devastating. But the thought of continuing to pretend everything was fine while his wife actively wished for my death was equally unbearable. I want to protect myself, I said finally. I can't live with this level of disrespect and potential threat. If Marcus chooses his wife's behavior over basic human decency, then maybe our relationship isn't as strong as I thought. Gerald leaned forward, his expression serious but not unkind. Ruth, based on what you've shown me, I believe you're dealing with someone who views you as an obstacle to her financial future. The combination of the hostile posts and the research into inheritance law suggests she's hoping to either inherit sooner rather than later, or position herself to challenge your decisions if you don't comply with her wishes. He pulled out a fresh legal pad and began sketching out options. We have several ways to address this. First, we can revise your will to include specific protections against undue influence or coercion. Second, we can create a living trust that removes your assets from probate and gives you more control over distribution. Third, we can add specific language addressing the behavior you've documented. What kind of language? I asked. Essentially, a clause stating that any beneficiary who engages in harassment, threats, or abusive behavior toward you will forfeit their inheritance rights. It's called a no-contest clause, and while they're not always enforceable, they can be effective deterrents. I felt a spark of satisfaction at this idea. So, if Vanessa continues posting about wanting me dead, she could actually cause Marcus to lose his inheritance. Potentially, yes. Especially if we can document a pattern of abuse or coercion. Gerald tapped his pen against the legal pad. But Ruth, I have to warn you, this kind of legal maneuvering could escalate the situation dramatically. If Vanessa discovers you've changed your will in response to her behavior, she might become more aggressive rather than backing down. What do you mean by more aggressive? Gerald's expression grew even more serious. In my experience, people who research elder care law and inheritance rights aren't just planning for natural death. They're sometimes looking for ways to have someone declared incompetent or to gain power of attorney under questionable circumstances. I've seen cases where hostile family members manufacture emergencies or health crises to justify taking control of an elder's finances. The implications of this sent a chill down my spine. You think she might try to have me declared mentally incompetent? It's possible. If she can create a narrative that you're becoming confused, making poor decisions, or endangering yourself, she might be able to convince a court that Marcus needs to step in as your guardian. And if Marcus is influenced by his wife. Gerald let the sentence hang unfinished. I thought about this for several minutes. In my military career, I'd learned that the best defense was often a strong offense. Waiting for someone to attack you was rarely as effective as making the first strategic move. Gerald, what if we turn this around? Instead of just protecting against future attacks, what if we create a situation where Vanessa's behavior has immediate consequences? Gerald raised an eyebrow. What did you have in mind? She's posting publicly about wanting me dead, researching inheritance law, and actively trying to turn her friends against me. What if I respond publicly too? Not with attacks or insults, but with information about the consequences of her behavior? You mean responding to her social media posts directly? Exactly. She thinks she's safe posting this stuff because she assumes I either don't see it or won't do anything about it. What if she's wrong on both counts? Gerald was quiet for a moment, considering the implications. It's certainly not illegal to respond to public posts with factual information about your own estate planning decisions. And it might shock her into better behavior if she realizes you're not as passive as she assumed. We spent the next hour crafting a strategy. Gerald would immediately begin drafting revisions to my will, including the no contest clause and additional protections against coercion. We would also create a living trust to provide extra security. In the meantime, I would document any additional hostile behavior and prepare for the possibility that Vanessa might escalate her attacks once she realized I was fighting back. "There's one more thing we should discuss," Gerald said as our meeting was winding down. "Have you considered the possibility that this isn't just about money? Some people genuinely enjoy cruelty for its own sake. Even if you disinherited Marcus completely, Vanessa might continue her behavior simply because she likes hurting you." This was a sobering thought. I'd been operating under the assumption that Vanessa's hostility was financially motivated, that she wanted my money and saw me as an obstacle. But Gerald was right that some people were just mean-spirited by nature. "If that's the case," I said, "then protecting my assets is only part of the solution. I also need to protect my peace of mind and my dignity." "Exactly. And sometimes the best way to deal with a bully is to show them you're not afraid to fight back." I left Gerald's office feeling more empowered than I had since discovering Vanessa's posts. I had a plan, I had legal support, and I had documentation of everything she'd done. Most importantly, I had decided that I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. That afternoon, I drove to the bank and met with my financial advisor, Sarah Chen. Sarah had been managing my investments since Frank's death, and she was familiar with my financial situation. I explained what had happened and asked her to help me understand exactly what Marcus stood to inherit under my current will. The numbers were more substantial than I'd remembered. Between my house, savings accounts, retirement funds, life insurance policies, and investment portfolio, the total value was closer to $600,000. For a young couple struggling to buy their first home, this represented life-changing money. "Sarah," I said, "if I wanted to set up charitable donations or other distributions that would reduce Marcus's inheritance, what would be my options?" Sarah pulled out a calculator and began running scenarios. "Well, you could establish charitable remainder trusts, make direct donations, or set up educational funds for other family members. You could also create multiple smaller bequests to friends, neighbors, or organizations you care about." We spent an hour discussing possibilities. I could donate to veterans organizations, establish a scholarship fund at the local high school, or create a fund to support military families in financial distress. There were dozens of worthy causes that would benefit from even a portion of my estate. "The key thing to remember," Sarah said, "is that this is your money, earned through your service and your late husband's service. You have every right to distribute it however you see fit, regardless of what your family expects or believes they're entitled to." This was exactly what I needed to hear. I'd been thinking about my estate in terms of what Marcus expected to inherit, rather than what I wanted to accomplish with my life savings. Frank and I had worked hard for this money. We'd sacrificed, saved, and invested wisely. If Marcus and his wife didn't appreciate that sacrifice, then maybe they didn't deserve to benefit from it. That evening, I called my brother Tom in Phoenix. Tom was 5 years older than me, a retired Air Force colonel, and one of the few people who truly understood military family dynamics. I'd helped him through his own divorce 15 years ago, and he'd been a steady source of support after Frank's death. "Ruthie," Tom said when he heard my voice, "you sound upset. What's going on?" I explained the situation with Vanessa's posts and my meeting with Gerald. Tom listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of disgust or anger. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Jesus, Ruth. This is worse than just disrespect. This is psychological warfare. And the timing makes it even more cruel. You're still grieving Frank, still figuring out life alone, and this little witch is actively trying to isolate you and make you feel worthless." That's exactly how it feels, I admitted. Like she's trying to convince everyone, including me, that I'm a burden who should just disappear quietly. Well, she picked the wrong target, Tom said firmly. You didn't survive 22 years in the army by letting people walk all over you. And you didn't build a successful marriage and raise a good son by backing down from conflict. We talked for another half hour about potential strategies and responses. Tom offered to fly out and confront Vanessa directly, which I appreciated but declined. This was something I needed to handle myself, in my own way, on my own terms. Just remember, Tom said before we hung up, you don't owe anyone access to your life or your money. Family relationship is a two-way street. If someone isn't willing to treat you with basic respect and decency, then they forfeit the right to be treated like family. Friday morning, I woke up with a clear sense of purpose. I'd spent 2 days planning and preparing, and now it was time to act. I made my usual coffee, settled into my armchair, and opened Facebook on my laptop. Vanessa had posted something new overnight. Another meme, this one showing a clock with the caption, "TikTok, some people's time is up." Underneath, she'd written, "When you're just waiting for certain situations to resolve themselves naturally, our patience is a virtue not you're waiting for change." The post already had several likes and comments from her usual crew of enablers. Reading their responses made my blood boil, but it also crystallized my resolve. This wasn't just about Vanessa anymore. She'd created an entire social media echo chamber devoted to mocking and dismissing me. I clicked the comment button and began typing my response. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for just a moment before I began typing my response to Vanessa's latest TikTok post. I wanted my words to be measured, factual, and impossible to dismiss as an emotional overreaction. Thanks for the reminder about time, Vanessa. You're absolutely right that situations do resolve themselves naturally. Speaking of which, I just had the most productive meeting with my estate attorney this week. Amazing how much clarity you get about your priorities when you really pay attention to what people are saying about you. Thanks for helping me make some important decisions. I hit the comment button before I could second-guess myself. Within minutes, my phone started buzzing with notifications. Vanessa's friends were reacting with confused emojis and question marks. Someone named Brittany commented, "Wait, what's happening here?" Another friend wrote, "Awkward much?" But the most telling response came from Vanessa herself, just 20 minutes after my comment appeared. She sent me a private message that said, "Mom Ruth, I'm not sure what you meant by that comment, but I hope we can talk soon. Maybe there was a misunderstanding?" I screenshot the message and saved it to my growing documentation folder. The sudden shift from public mockery to private concern told me everything I needed to know about her awareness of what she'd been doing. She knew exactly how her posts would be interpreted, and she was panicking now that I'd responded publicly. I didn't reply to her private message. Instead, I spent the morning going through her previous posts and leaving carefully crafted comments on the most egregious ones. On the meme about grandmothers with angel wings, I wrote, "What an interesting perspective on elder care. I've been researching estate planning lately, and it's fascinating how people's true feelings about family can really influence important financial decisions." On the post about toxic family members, I commented, "So true. I've learned that the best way to handle people who don't value you is to make sure they can't take advantage of your generosity anymore. Thanks for the inspiration to make some overdue changes." Each comment was polite, even friendly in tone. But the message was clear. I saw what she was doing. I wasn't intimidated, and there would be consequences. I was careful not to make any threats or say anything that could be construed as harassment. I was simply responding to her public posts with my own thoughts and experiences. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Vanessa's friends started commenting, with confusion and concern. Her sister Ashley wrote, "Van, what is happening? Is everything okay with your family?" Another friend asked, "Girl, are you and your MIL having drama?" This seems intense. But the most satisfying response came from someone I didn't recognize, a woman named Carol who appeared to be a coworker of Vanessa's at the dental office. Carol wrote, "Vanessa, I had no idea you were having problems with your husband's mom. You always talked about her like she was so generous and supportive. This is really confusing." That comment struck at the heart of Vanessa's duplicity. She'd been presenting herself as the grateful daughter-in-law in person and at work, while simultaneously trashing me online to a different group of friends. Now those two narratives were colliding publicly, and she was going to have to explain the contradiction. My phone rang around noon. It was Marcus, and he sounded stressed and confused. "Mom, what's going on with you and Vanessa on Facebook? She's really upset, and honestly, I don't understand what happened. She said you left some weird comments on her posts, and now her friends are asking questions." I took a deep breath. This was the conversation I'd been dreading, but knew was inevitable. "Marcus, have you actually looked at what she's been posting about me?" "What do you mean?" "She posts normal stuff, memes and pictures and whatever. I don't really pay attention to social media." "Son, I need you to go look at her Facebook page. Really look at it. Go back through her posts from the last few months and read what she's been saying about grandmothers and elderly family members. Then call me back." There was a pause. "Mom, you're scaring me." "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about posts where she shares memes about grandmothers needing to die and get out of the way. Posts where she likes articles about cutting off toxic elderly relatives. Posts where she talks about waiting for certain situations to resolve themselves naturally. Marcus, she's been publicly wishing for my death and encouraging her friends to agree with her." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Marcus said quietly, "That can't be right, Mom. Vanessa loves you. She's always talking about how grateful she is for everything you've done for us. Then go look at her posts and see for yourself. I've been documenting everything, Marcus. Screenshots, dates, comment threads. This has been going on for months while she smiled to my face and accepted my help. Okay, let me look and call you back." He hung up, and I sat in my kitchen staring at my phone. This was the moment of truth. Either Marcus would see his wife's behavior for what it was, or he would find a way to excuse and defend it. Either way, I would know where I stood with my son. 30 minutes later, my phone rang again. Marcus sounded shaken when he answered. "Mom, I don't know what to say. I had no idea she was posting this stuff. I asked her about it and she got really defensive. She said it was just harmless, venting, and that you were overreacting." "Harmless venting?" I couldn't keep the incredulity out of my voice. "Marcus, she posted a meme about grandmothers dying and going to heaven with the caption, 'Some people need to accept their time is up.' How is that harmless?" she said. She said those posts weren't about you specifically, that they were just general complaints about difficult family situations. I felt my heart sink. He was already making excuses for her. "Son, I'm the only grandmother in her life. I'm the only elderly family member she deals with regularly. Who else could those posts possibly be about?" "I don't know, Mom. Maybe her own grandmother, or just general frustration?" "Her grandmother lives in California and they talk maybe twice a year. Marcus, you're a smart man. Don't let love make you blind to what's right in front of you." There was another long pause. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was strained. "What do you want me to do? She's my wife. I can't just— she made a mistake, but people say stupid things online all the time." This wasn't one stupid post, Marcus. This was a sustained campaign of cruelty lasting months, and she wasn't just venting. She was researching inheritance law and elder care rights. She's been planning something. Planning what? I don't know exactly, but people don't research legal ways to challenge an elderly person's mental competency unless they're thinking about using that information. Marcus was quiet for so long I wondered if he'd hung up. Finally, he said, "Mom, I think you might be reading too much into this. Vanessa can be dramatic online, but she would never actually hurt you or try to steal from you or anything like that. And there it was. My son was choosing willful blindness over uncomfortable truth. He'd seen the evidence, but he was going to rationalize it away rather than confront his wife's cruelty. I hope you're right, son, I said quietly, but I'm not willing to bet my security and dignity on it. I've made some changes to protect myself, and I hope you can understand why that was necessary. What kind of changes? Legal changes? Financial? Changes. The kind of changes people make when they realize they can't trust someone who has access to their life. Marcus's voice became alarmed. Mom, what does that mean? Are you cutting me out of your will or something? The panic in his voice was telling. Despite his protests about Vanessa's innocence, he immediately understood the potential financial consequences of her behavior. I'm making sure that my assets are protected from people who don't have my best interests at heart, I said carefully. Whether that affects you depends on whether you're willing to address this situation with your wife or continue to enable her behavior. Enable her behavior? Mom, she posted some stupid memes online. You're acting like she committed a crime. I arranged to meet her at Sunrise Diner, a local restaurant where we'd be in public but could still have a private conversation. I arrived 15 minutes early and chose a booth in the back corner where we wouldn't be overheard. The waitress, a woman named Dolores who'd been working there for 20 years, brought me coffee and asked about Frank out of habit before remembering he was gone. These small moments of forgetting still hit me like little punches to the chest. Vanessa arrived, exactly on time, looking nervous and uncharacteristically subdued. She usually entered any room with confidence, immediately commanding attention with her bright smile and animated gestures. Today, she slipped into the booth across from me quietly, her hands fidgeting with her purse strap. Mom Ruth, thank you for meeting me, she began, her voice cautious. I know you're upset, and I want to make things right between us. I studied her face carefully. There was anxiety there, definitely, but I wasn't sure if it was genuine remorse or simply fear of consequences. I'm glad you want to make things right, Vanessa. The first step would be acknowledging what you did wrong. She nodded quickly, as if she'd prepared for this question. I posted some things online that were inappropriate. I was venting about family stress, and I didn't think about how my words might be interpreted. I never meant for you to see those posts, and I certainly never meant to hurt your feelings. Felt my jaw clench. Even her apology was self-serving and dishonest. Vanessa, let's be very clear about what you did. You didn't post inappropriate content about family stress. You shared memes about grandmothers dying and going to heaven, with captions about people needing to accept their time is up. You liked and shared articles about cutting off toxic elderly relatives. You encouraged your friends to laugh along with jokes about difficult in-laws. This wasn't venting. This was systematic cruelty. Her face flushed, but she maintained her defensive posture. I understand why you might interpret it that way, but those posts weren't specifically about you. They were general complaints about difficult family dynamics that a lot of people can relate to. General complaints? I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshots I'd prepared. Let me read you some of your own words, Vanessa. Some people just need to accept their time is up. Sorry, not sorry, and family truth. Who exactly were you referring to if not me? She glanced around nervously, clearly uncomfortable with me quoting. Her posts back to her in public. Look, maybe I was frustrated sometimes. Living in the garage apartment, we don't have much privacy, and sometimes I felt like we couldn't make our own decisions without input. Input? Is that what you call caring about your welfare and offering help when you need it? I leaned forward slightly. Vanessa, I let you live rent-free in my garage apartment for 3 years. I helped pay for your wedding. I've given you money for groceries, car repairs, and medical bills. I've included you in every family gathering and treated you like the daughter I never had. And your response was to publicly mock me and wish for my death. Tears appeared in her eyes, but they looked more like tears of frustration than genuine sorrow. I never wished for your death. That's not what those posts meant at all. You're twisting my words and making them sound worse than they were. Then explain to me exactly what they did mean, I said calmly. Explain the meme about grandmothers with angel wings and halos. Explain your comment about certain situations resolving themselves naturally. Explain why you were researching inheritance law and elder care rights. The color drained from her face at the mention of her research history. She clearly hadn't expected me to know about that aspect of her behavior. I was just curious about legal stuff. It doesn't mean anything sinister. Curious about what, specifically? About how to have someone declared mentally incompetent? About what rights adult children have when elderly parents make decisions they don't like? About how to challenge a will? Vanessa's composure finally cracked. Her voice became sharp and defensive. Why are you acting like I'm some kind of criminal? So what if I looked up some legal information? That doesn't mean I was planning anything against you. Maybe I was just trying to understand my rights in case something happened to you naturally. In case something happened to me naturally, I repeated slowly. And what exactly did you expect to happen to me naturally, Vanessa? I'm 62 years old and in perfect health. She realized how her words sounded and tried to backtrack. I just meant, like, eventually, when you're much older. Everyone needs to plan for the future. Everyone needs to plan for the future. But not everyone posts memes about their in-laws dying and researches legal ways to challenge their autonomy. That combination suggests you weren't just planning for the distant future, you were hoping to accelerate it. The accusation hung in the air between us. Vanessa's tears were flowing freely now, but her expression was more angry than repentant. I can't believe you would think such horrible things about me. I love you like a mother. I would never want anything bad to happen to you. You love me like a mother? I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. Vanessa, I've seen how you treat your own mother. You told me she was too busy and uninterested to be involved in your life. But I spoke with Jennifer yesterday and she told me a very different story. Vanessa's eyes widened in shock and panic. You talked to my mother. Why would you do that? Because she reached out to me when she heard we were having problems. Imagine my surprise when I learned that she's been begging you to visit for years, that she sent you plane tickets last Christmas that you claimed I needed for some family emergency. You've been lying to both of us, keeping us separated so we couldn't compare notes about your behavior. She was shaking now, her carefully constructed facade completely shattered. You don't understand. It's complicated with my mom. She doesn't really understand my life here. What's complicated about it? She loves you and wants to be involved in your life, just like I loved you and wanted to be involved in your life. But you found it more convenient to play us against each other, to manipulate both relationships for your own benefit. Vanessa wiped her eyes with her napkin, leaving streaks of mascara on the white paper. Mom Ruth, I know I made mistakes. I know I handled things badly. But please don't let this destroy our family. Marcus loves you so much, and if you cut us off, it will break his heart. I'm not cutting you off, Vanessa. You cut yourself off when you chose cruelty over kindness, lies over honesty, manipulation over genuine relationship. I'm simply protecting myself from further abuse. Abuse? Her voice rose slightly, causing other diners to glance in our direction. Posting some stupid memes online isn't abuse. You're being way too dramatic about this. And there it was. The dismissal, the minimization, the refusal to take responsibility. Even faced with overwhelming evidence of her cruelty, she was still trying to make me the unreasonable one. Vanessa, systematic harassment designed to isolate and dehumanize someone is absolutely abuse. Creating a social media campaign to mock and dismiss me while researching ways to undermine my legal autonomy is abuse. Lying to multiple family members to manipulate relationships is abuse. The fact that you can't or won't acknowledge this tells me everything I need to know about your character." She sat in silence for several minutes, staring at her untouched coffee. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but carried an undertone of threat. "So what happens now? Are you going to punish Marcus for my mistakes? Are you going to destroy his relationship with his mother because his wife posted some things you didn't like?" Marcus is a grown man who can make his own choices. If he chooses to enable and defend your behavior, then he's choosing sides. I hope he makes better decisions than that, but I won't sacrifice my dignity and security to maintain a relationship with someone who allows me to be abused. Allows you to be abused? Vanessa's mask slipped further, revealing genuine anger underneath the tears. Marcus doesn't even use social media. He had no idea what I was posting, and frankly, he shouldn't have to monitor my every word online. You're asking him to choose between his wife and his mother over some stupid internet drama. I'm asking him to choose between right and wrong. I'm asking him to stand up for basic human decency and respect. If that feels like an impossible choice to either of you, then maybe we have bigger problems than social media posts. Vanessa leaned back in the booth, her expression hardening. Fine. Let's say I was wrong to post those things. Let's say I should have handled my frustrations differently. What do you want from me? What would it take for you to forgive me and move on? I considered her question carefully. What would genuine accountability look like from someone who had spent months systematically trying to dehumanize me? First, you would need to take down every post that mocked or dismissed elderly people and family members. Second, you would need to post a public apology, acknowledging that your behavior was cruel and unacceptable. Third, you would need to make things right with your own mother and stop using me as an excuse to avoid your family obligations. Fourth, you would need to find your own housing. I can't have someone living on my property who has demonstrated such hostility toward me. And fifth, you would need to prove through consistent actions over time that you've genuinely changed, not just that you're sorry you got caught. Each condition seemed to hit her like a physical blow. By the time I finished, she was staring at me with open hostility. You want me to humiliate myself publicly? You want me to admit to all my friends and coworkers that I'm some kind of terrible person? You want me to uproot my entire life because you can't handle some jokes online? I want you to take responsibility for the harm you've caused and demonstrate that you understand why your behavior was wrong. If that feels like humiliation, maybe you should ask yourself why. Vanessa was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her calculating. Finally, she leaned forward, her voice taking on a pleading tone. Mom Ruth, please be reasonable. I can apologize privately, and I can be more careful about what I post online, but asking me to humiliate myself publicly and move out of the apartment, that's not fair. Marcus and I can't afford our own place right now, and this would put us in a really difficult financial situation. You should have thought about that before you decided to wage a social media campaign against the person providing your housing, I replied. Actions have consequences, Vanessa. You can't treat someone with cruelty and contempt while simultaneously expecting them to subsidize your lifestyle. Her expression shifted again, this time to something resembling panic. What if? What if I delete all the posts and promise never to do anything like this again? Would that be enough? I know I was wrong, and I swear it won't happen again. I shook my head. Deleting the posts now is just damage control, not accountability. And your promises don't mean much when you've already demonstrated that you can smile to my face while trashing me behind my back for months. Vanessa sat back, her face cycling through various emotions: fear, anger, calculation, desperation. Finally, she seemed to settle on a strategy. I think you're having some kind of breakdown, she said, her voice becoming artificially gentle. This level of anger and paranoia over some social media posts isn't normal. Maybe you should talk to someone, a therapist or your doctor. Grief can make people see threats that aren't really there. The gaslighting attempt was so blatant it was almost comical. Are you seriously trying to suggest that I'm mentally unstable for objecting to your behavior? That's exactly the kind of manipulation I was warning Marcus about. I'm not manipulating anyone. I'm genuinely concerned about you. This obsession with my social media posts, these threats about changing your will, the paranoid interpretation of normal family dynamics, it's not healthy behavior. I stood up from the booth, recognizing that this conversation had reached its natural conclusion. Vanessa had shown me exactly who she was and what I could expect from her in the future. No genuine remorse, no real accountability, just excuses, minimization, and attempts to make me question my own judgment. Vanessa, this conversation is over. You've made it clear that you have no intention of taking responsibility for your actions or making genuine amends. You'd rather gaslight me and question my mental stability than acknowledge the harm you've caused. She stood up as well, her composure finally completely gone. Fine, if you want to destroy this family over some stupid online posts, that's your choice. But don't expect Marcus to choose you over me. He's my husband, and he knows who really cares about his happiness. We'll see, I said calmly, leaving money on the table for my coffee. Goodbye, Vanessa. As I walked toward the exit, I heard her call after me. You're going to regret this. You're going to end up alone and bitter, and it'll be your own fault. I didn't turn around or respond. I simply walked to my car and drove home, knowing that I had given her every opportunity to do the right thing. And she had chosen cruelty instead. That afternoon, I called Gerald and scheduled an emergency meeting for Monday morning. It was time to implement the more aggressive protections we had discussed. The weekend passed in tense silence. No calls from Marcus, no messages from Vanessa, no attempts at reconciliation or further manipulation. I spent Saturday afternoon in my garden, pulling weeds and deadheading the late summer flowers that Frank had planted our first year in the house. The physical work helped clear my mind and reinforce my resolve. I'd given Vanessa every opportunity to show genuine remorse, and she'd chosen to double down on her cruelty instead. Sunday morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was making breakfast when I heard a car door slam in my driveway. Through the kitchen window, I saw Marcus climbing the steps to my front door, his shoulders slumped and his face drawn with exhaustion. He looked like he hadn't slept much. When I opened the door, he didn't meet my eyes immediately. Mom, can we talk? Please? I stepped aside to let him in, noting that he was alone. Where's Vanessa? She's at her friend Ashley's house. We've been fighting since yesterday morning. He followed me to the kitchen and slumped into one of the chairs at my breakfast table. She told me about your meeting at the diner. Her version, anyway. I poured him a cup of coffee without asking, the same way I had when he was a teenager, coming home from late shifts at his first job. What did she tell you? Marcus accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping his hands around the mug like he needed the warmth. She said you completely lost it, that you screamed at her in public and made impossible demands. She said you're having some kind of mental breakdown and that you threatened to cut me out of your will over social media posts that weren't even about you. I sat down across from him, studying his face. He looked genuinely confused and torn, not defensive or angry. That gave me hope that he might actually be willing to listen to the truth. Is that what you think happened, Marcus? He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee. I don't know what to think anymore, Mom. I've been married to Vanessa for 3 years and I thought I knew her. But then I saw those posts you showed me and they were really mean. Meaner than I ever thought she could be. Did you ask her to explain them? Yeah, and she kept saying they weren't about you specifically, that they were just general venting about family stress. But Mom? He looked up at me with Frank's eyes, tired and sad. I know you're the only grandmother she deals with. I know you're the only elderly family member in her regular life. Those posts had to be about you. I felt a flicker of relief. He wasn't completely blinded by love and loyalty. He could see the obvious truth even when it was painful. What else has she told you about yesterday's conversation? Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. She said you demanded that she humiliate herself publicly, give up our apartment, and basically destroy her life because you couldn't handle some internet jokes. She said you were cruel and unreasonable. Did she mention that she tried to gaslight me by suggesting I was having a mental breakdown? Did she tell you that she called my concerns paranoid and obsessive? His face tightened. No, she didn't. Mention that part. Did she tell you that I spoke with her mother, Jennifer, and discovered that Vanessa has been lying to both of us for years, keeping us separated and feeding us contradictory stories about each other? Marcus's coffee mug hit the table harder than he'd intended. What? What do you mean? I explained my conversation with Jennifer, the plane tickets that Vanessa had claimed. I needed for a family emergency. The weekly phone calls she'd told me didn't happen. The years of separation she'd orchestrated through careful manipulation. Her own mother has been begging to see you both for 3 years, Marcus. Vanessa told me Jennifer was too busy and uninterested to be involved in her life. She told Jennifer that I was too demanding and needy for you to travel. She's been playing us against each other while presenting herself as the victim caught. In the middle? Marcus put his head in his hands. Jesus, Mom, why would she do that? What's the point of keeping us apart? Control. As long as Jennifer and I never compared notes, Vanessa could tell each of us whatever story served her purposes. She could paint herself as the long-suffering daughter-in-law to me and the devoted daughter to her mother, while actually being neither. We sat in silence for several minutes. I could see Marcus processing this information, trying to reconcile it with the woman he'd married and thought he knew. There's something else, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Yesterday, after she told me about your meeting, I asked her to show me all the posts you'd mentioned. She said she'd already deleted most of them, but I found some in her saved items and shared memories. He pulled out his phone and showed me a screenshot. It was one I hadn't seen before. A meme showing an elderly woman being pushed off a cliff, with the caption, "Sometimes nature needs a little help speeding things along." Vanessa had shared it 6 weeks ago with 3 laughing, crying emojis. My blood ran cold. Marcus, this isn't just wishing for my death. This is fantasizing about causing it. I know. His voice was hollow. When I confronted her about it, she said it was just dark humor and that I was being too sensitive. She said you'd brainwashed me against her. What do you think? Marcus looked up at me with tears in his eyes. I think my wife might be a person I don't know at all, and I think I've been incredibly naive. I reached across the table and took his hand. Son, love makes us want to see the best in people. That's not naive. That's human. But when someone shows you who they really are, you have to believe them. She's my wife, Mom. I made vows to her, for better or worse, in sickness and in health. Even if she's done terrible things, aren't I supposed to try to work through it? I squeezed his hand gently. Marcus, there's a difference between working through normal marital problems and enabling abuse. Your wife has spent months publicly fantasizing about my death while living in my garage apartment rent-free and accepting my financial help. That's not a rough patch in a marriage. That's a fundamental character flaw. But what if she can change? What if this was just a phase, some kind of stress reaction or something? I understood his desperation to find an explanation that would allow him to keep his marriage intact. But I also knew that some lines, once crossed, revealed truths about character that couldn't be uncrossed. Marcus, change requires acknowledgement of wrongdoing and genuine remorse. Yesterday, when I gave Vanessa the opportunity to take responsibility and make amends, she chose to gaslight me instead. She tried to convince me that I was mentally unstable for objecting to her behavior. Does that sound like someone who's ready to change? He was quiet for a long time, staring out my kitchen window at the garage apartment where his wife was supposed to be living. She's been different lately, he said finally. More secretive, more defensive about her phone and her computer. She gets angry when I ask about her day or her friends. I thought it was just work stress or maybe problems with her family, but now you're wondering what else she might be hiding? Yeah. And I'm wondering how long she's been lying to me about other things. We talked for another hour about his marriage, his doubts, and his options. I was careful not to push him toward any particular decision, but I wanted him to understand the full scope of what Vanessa's behavior revealed about her character. Mom, can I ask you something difficult? Marcus said as our conversation was winding down. Of course. Are you really going to change your will because of this? I chose my words carefully. I'm going to make sure my assets are protected from people who might not have my best interests at heart. Whether that affects your inheritance depends on whether you choose to enable and defend behavior that puts me at risk. What kind of risk? Marcus, your wife researched legal ways to challenge elderly people's mental competency. She looked up information about guardianship and power of attorney rights. Combined with her public posts about wanting me dead, that suggests she might be planning to have me declared incompetent at some point. His face went pale. You really think she'd try something like that? I think she's someone who fantasizes about violence against me while researching legal ways to undermine my autonomy. I can't afford to assume those are unrelated interests. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, absorbing the implications. If I divorce her, would that change your mind about the will? This isn't about punishing or rewarding you, son. It's about protecting myself from someone who has shown herself to be dangerous. If you distance yourself from Vanessa and her toxic behavior, then yes, that would affect my assessment of the risks I face. But if I stay married to her, then I have to assume you're choosing to align yourself with someone who wishes me harm. I can't leave substantial assets to someone who might use them to enable or reward my abuser. The weight of that statement settled between us. Marcus was facing the possibility that his marriage might cost him not just his relationship with me, but also his financial future. This is so messed up, he said, his voice breaking slightly. 3 days ago, I thought I had a normal family, a wife who loved my mom, a mom who was happy and secure. Now everything is falling apart. It was already falling apart, Marcus. You just didn't know it yet. The question now is whether you want to help me fix what can be fixed or continue pretending everything is fine while it gets worse. He stood up from the table, his decision clearly made. I need to go home and have a very serious conversation with my wife. And Mom? I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening. And I'm sorry. I didn't protect you from it. You couldn't protect me from something you didn't know about. But you can protect me going forward by making sure it doesn't continue. After Marcus left, I called Gerald and confirmed our Monday morning appointment. Then I spent the rest of Sunday preparing for what I suspected would be the most challenging week of my life. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. I dressed carefully in my best suit, navy blue with a white blouse, the outfit I'd worn to Frank's funeral and other important occasions where I needed to project strength and dignity. Gerald's office felt familiar and safe, a refuge where I could speak freely about my fears and plans. Ruth, you look like a woman with a mission, Gerald observed as I settled into the client chair. I am. Vanessa showed her true colors this weekend, and I need maximum protection now. I recounted the diner conversation and Marcus's visit, including the new meme about pushing elderly people off cliffs. Gerald listened intently, taking notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. This escalates things significantly, he said when I finished. The meme about violence, combined with her research into competency challenges, suggests she might be moving from passive fantasy to active planning. That's exactly what I'm afraid of. And Gerald, there's something else. Marcus is starting to see his wife's true character, but he's torn between loyalty to her and protecting me. I need to structure my estate planning in a way that encourages him to make the right choice, without punishing him unfairly if he makes the wrong one. Gerald nodded thoughtfully. We can create graduated consequences. Basic protections that kick in immediately, with additional measures that only activate if certain behaviors continue or escalate. We spent 2 hours restructuring my estate plan. The new will included a no-contest clause, specific language about harassment and abuse, and a trust structure that would protect my assets even if someone successfully challenged my mental competency. We also created a living will with very specific instructions about medical decision-making, preventing anyone from claiming I was unable to make my own healthcare choices. There's one more thing I want to do, I told Gerald as we were finishing up. I want to make a substantial donation to charity now, while I'm alive, so that anyone counting on inheriting a large sum will be disappointed regardless of what happens to me. Gerald smiled grimly. Nothing sends a message quite like reducing the prize they're competing for. That afternoon, I transferred $50,000 to a veterans organization that helped military families facing financial crises. It felt good to put my money towards something meaningful rather than leaving it to people who wished me harm. Tuesday brought the confrontation I'd been expecting. Vanessa showed up at my door at 8 in the morning, her face blotchy with tears, and her voice desperate. Mom, Ruth, we need to talk. Marcus is talking about divorce, and this whole situation is spiraling out of control. Please, you have to help me fix this. I looked at her through the screen door, noting the calculated nature of her distress. Even her tears seemed performative, designed to manipulate rather than express genuine emotion. There's nothing to fix, Vanessa. You made your choices, and now you're living with the consequences. But I love Marcus. I love this family. I know I made mistakes, but people should get second chances. Isn't that what family is about? Forgiveness and love? Family is about mutual respect and care, neither of which you've shown me. You can't spend months wishing for someone's death and then claim to love them when it becomes inconvenient. Her desperation shifted quickly to anger, just as it had at the diner. Fine, if you want to be vindictive and cruel, that's your choice. But don't expect me to just disappear quietly. I have rights too, and I won't let you destroy my marriage without a fight. I opened the screen door and stepped onto the porch, meeting her anger with calm resolve. What kind of fight did you have in mind, Vanessa? The question seemed to catch her off guard. She'd been expecting me to back down or become defensive, not to challenge her directly. I just meant that I won't give up on my marriage. Marcus loves me, and once he gets past this temporary insanity you've caused, he'll remember that. Marcus is seeing clearly for the first time in years. That's not insanity. That's awakening. Vanessa's mask slipped completely, revealing the rage and entitlement underneath. You manipulative old bitch. You can't stand that your son chose someone else, so you're trying to destroy his happiness. Well, I won't let you win. I smiled calmly. I already won, Vanessa. The moment you showed the world who you really are, you lost any power you had over this family. She stormed off my porch and drove away, tires squealing against the pavement. I watched her go, knowing that this wasn't over, but feeling confident that I was prepared for whatever came next. That evening, Marcus called to tell me he'd filed for divorce. The divorce papers were served to Vanessa on Thursday afternoon while she was at work. Marcus had decided to have them delivered to the dental office rather than risk a confrontation at home. He called me that evening to let me know it was done, his voice hollow with exhaustion and grief. She called me 17 times before I finally answered, he told me. She was screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Dr. Peterson had to ask her to leave the office because she was scaring the patients. I felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction that Marcus had found the courage to protect himself. Sadness that it had come to this point. How are you holding up, son? I keep expecting to feel relieved, but mostly I just feel empty. 3 years of my life, Mom. 3 years of believing I was building something with someone who turned out to be... He trailed off, unable to find the words. Someone who wasn't who she pretended to be. I finished gently. That's not your fault, Marcus. She was very good at deception. Was I really that blind? Were there signs I should have seen? I thought carefully about how to answer. There had been signs, Vanessa's subtle manipulations, her tendency to isolate Marcus from extended family, her pattern of creating drama whenever she wasn't the center of attention. But pointing that out now would only make Marcus feel worse about himself. Hindsight always makes things clearer, I said instead. You loved her and trusted her, which is what you're supposed to do in a marriage. She exploited that trust, but that says something about her character, not yours. Marcus was quiet for a moment. She's demanding half of everything in the divorce. The savings account, the furniture, even wants me to keep paying rent on the garage apartment so she can stay there until she finds somewhere else to live. I felt my blood pressure spike. Even in divorce, Vanessa was trying to extract maximum benefit while contributing nothing. What did your lawyer say? He said Iowa is a no-fault state, so her behavior probably won't affect the financial settlement much. But he also said that since we don't have kids, and we've only been married 3 years, the court isn't likely to award her long-term support. And the garage apartment? He said you can evict her whenever you want since there's no lease agreement. She's been living there as your guest, not as a tenant with legal rights. This gave me an idea. Marcus, what if we handle this strategically? Instead of letting her stay in the apartment, what if I give her 30 days notice to vacate? That puts time pressure on her to settle the divorce quickly, rather than dragging it out. You'd do that? Son, I'm not going to continue housing someone who has threatened me and wishes me harm. The fact that she's divorcing you doesn't make her any less dangerous to me. We talked for another half hour about logistics and legal strategies. Marcus was staying at his friend Jake's house temporarily, giving Vanessa space to pack her belongings and process the divorce papers. He seemed relieved to have some distance from the situation. Friday morning, I drove to the Cedar Falls Police Department to file a formal complaint about Vanessa's online harassment. Officer Patricia Gonzalez, a woman in her 30s who specialized in domestic violence and cybercrime cases, reviewed my documentation with professional interest. Mrs. Carter, what you've documented here definitely constitutes a pattern of harassment, she said, scrolling through the screenshots on my laptop. These posts about elderly people dying, combined with the research into legal guardianship, could be interpreted as threats. What are my options? We can issue a formal warning, which creates an official record of the behavior. If she escalates to direct threats or actual stalking, we can pursue criminal charges. We can also help you get a restraining order if you feel physically threatened. I opted for the formal warning, which would be delivered to Vanessa by a uniformed officer. The psychological impact of having police show up at her workplace would send a clear message that her behavior had real-world consequences. There's one more thing, Officer Gonzalez said as we were finishing up. You mentioned that she's been researching ways to challenge elderly people's competency. If she ever tries to file false reports about your mental state or attempts to manipulate social services or medical professionals, having this documentation on file will be crucial for your defense. The implications of this advice were chilling. I hadn't fully considered that Vanessa might try to have me declared incompetent through false reports to authorities or medical professionals. But given her research history and her escalating desperation, it was a realistic concern. That afternoon, I received a call from Dr. Patricia Williams, my primary care physician for the past 8 years. Her voice was professional but concerned. Ruth, I had an unusual call today that I wanted to discuss with you. A young woman claiming to be your daughter-in-law called asking about your mental health and cognitive function. She said the family was concerned about your decision-making and wanted to know if there were any medical reasons for erratic behavior. My heart sank. Vanessa was already implementing the strategy I'd feared. Dr. Williams, that woman is in the process of divorcing my son, and she's been making threats against me. Whatever she told you was part of a harassment campaign. I assumed as much. I told her that I couldn't discuss any patient information without your written consent, and that your recent physical and cognitive assessments were completely normal. But Ruth, I'm concerned that she might try this with other providers or agencies. Dr. Williams suggested that we schedule a comprehensive cognitive assessment to create official documentation of my mental competency. She also recommended that I inform all my other healthcare providers about the harassment campaign and update my medical records to reflect the ongoing threat. Unfortunately, this kind of elder abuse is more common than people realize, Dr. Williams explained. Adult children or in-laws sometimes try to have elderly relatives declared incompetent as a way to gain control over their assets. Having comprehensive medical documentation of your cognitive health is your best protection. I scheduled the assessment for the following week and left Dr. Williams's office feeling both angry and vulnerable. Vanessa's willingness to involve my healthcare providers in her harassment campaign showed a level of calculation and malice that was truly frightening. Saturday brought an unexpected ally. Jennifer Rodriguez called me from Phoenix, her voice tight with anger. Ruth, I confronted Vanessa about everything we discussed. She denied it all at first, but when I showed her the screenshots you'd sent me, she finally admitted to posting some things that might have been misinterpreted. How did she explain the lies about our relationship? She claimed she was trying to protect me from your drama and protect you from my judgment. She said she thought it was better if we didn't communicate directly because we might not get along. I snorted with disgust. Even her excuses are manipulative. That's exactly what I told her. I said that grown women don't need a 28-year-old to manage their relationships, and that her interference was presumptuous and disrespectful to both of us. Jennifer went on to describe a confrontation that sounded remarkably similar to my own experience with Vanessa. Denial, followed by minimization, followed by blame shifting and attempts at emotional manipulation. She actually tried to convince me that you were having some kind of mental breakdown and that her posts were just responses to your increasingly erratic behavior, Jennifer said. When I asked for specific examples of this erratic behavior, she couldn't provide any. She tried the same gaslighting tactic with me. It seems to be her go-to strategy when confronted with evidence of her wrongdoing. Well, it backfired spectacularly. I told her that I'd been talking to you regularly now, and that you seemed perfectly rational and articulate. I also told her that her behavior toward you was cruel and unacceptable, and that I was ashamed to have raised someone capable of such heartlessness. I felt a surge of gratitude toward this woman I'd never met in person, but who had become such an important ally. How did she respond to that? She hung up on me. Haven't heard from her since, which is probably for the best. But Ruth, there's something else. I did some digging into her social media accounts, and I found posts going back 2 years where she complained about controlling in-laws and boundary issues with family members. This campaign against you has been building for much longer than we realized. This revelation was disturbing, but not entirely surprising. It suggested that Vanessa had been planning to eliminate me from Marcus's life for years, slowly building resentment and looking for opportunities to create conflict. Jennifer, can you send me those older posts? I'm documenting everything for legal purposes. Already on it. I'll email you everything I found, along with screenshots of our text conversation where she lied about the Christmas plane tickets. Sunday. Evening brought the confrontation I'd been expecting all week. Vanessa showed up at my door with red-rimmed eyes and a manila envelope in her hands. She looked like she hadn't slept or eaten much since receiving the divorce papers. Mom, Ruth, I know you probably don't want to see me, but I need to give you this. She held out the envelope with shaking hands. I opened the screen door but didn't invite her in. What is it? It's an eviction notice. My lawyer says you have to give me 60 days to find a new place, not 30. And he says that if you try to force me out sooner, I can sue you for unlawful eviction. I took the envelope and scanned the document inside. It was professionally prepared, but based on incorrect assumptions about tenant rights. Vanessa had no lease agreement, paid no rent, and had been living in the garage apartment as a guest, not a tenant. Vanessa, your lawyer is wrong. You're not a tenant. You're a guest who has overstayed her welcome. I can ask you to leave at any time. Her composure cracked slightly. But I don't have anywhere to go. My credit isn't good enough to get an apartment on my own, and I can't afford first month's rent and security deposit without Marcus's income. That's not my problem. You should have thought about housing security before you decided to wage a harassment campaign against your landlord. Harassment campaign. Her voice rose to a near shriek. I posted some stupid memes online. That doesn't make me a criminal. Actually, the police disagree with you. They classified your behavior as harassment when I filed a formal complaint. On Friday, the color drained from her face. You called the police on me? I documented your threats and your attempts to manipulate my healthcare providers. Officer Gonzalez was very interested in your research into elder abuse tactics. Vanessa staggered backward as if I'd struck her. I didn't threaten you, and I only called your doctor because I was worried about you. You called my doctor to plant seeds of doubt about my mental competency, just like you researched online. The pattern is clear, Vanessa, and it's all documented now. She stood on my porch for several minutes, apparently trying to process this new information. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet and desperate. What do you want from me? What would it take for you to give me another chance? I studied her face, looking for any sign of genuine remorse or self-awareness. What I saw was calculation. She was trying to figure out what performance might get her what she wanted. There's nothing you could do at this point that would convince me to trust you again. You've shown me who you really are, repeatedly and consistently. I believe you. But people can change. People make mistakes and learn from them. Change requires acknowledging the full scope of your wrongdoing and accepting responsibility without excuses. You've never done that. Even now, you're calling your behavior stupid memes instead of recognizing it as systematic cruelty. Vanessa's desperation shifted quickly to anger, just as it always did when manipulation failed. Fine. If you want to be vindictive and destroy my life over some internet posts, go ahead. But don't think this is over. I have rights, and I won't let you railroad me just because you have more money and connections. What rights do you think you have exactly? The right to defend myself against false accusations. The right to challenge your competency if you're making decisions based on paranoid delusions. The right to protect Marcus's inheritance from your spite. There it was, the threat I'd been expecting. She was already planning to challenge my mental competency and claim that my estate planning changes were the result of diminished capacity. Vanessa, you just made several statements that could be considered threats. I suggest you leave my property immediately and have any future communication go through your lawyer. She seemed to realize she'd said too much. Her expression shifted to fake innocence. I wasn't threatening you. I was just explaining my legal rights. Your legal rights don't include harassing me, filing false reports about my mental health, or interfering with my estate planning decisions. If you continue this behavior, you'll find out exactly what my legal rights are. I went inside and locked the door, watching through the peephole as Vanessa stood on my porch for several more minutes. She finally left, but not before taking photos of my house and garage apartment with her phone. I made a note to mention this surveillance behavior to Officer Gonzalez. That night, I called Gerald and recounted the confrontation. He listened carefully and made notes about her threats regarding competency challenges. Ruth, we need to accelerate your cognitive assessment and get all your estate planning documents finalized this week. If she's planning to challenge your competency, we need comprehensive medical and legal documentation in place before she can act. How quickly can we move? I'll have everything ready by Wednesday. And Ruth, I think it's time to consider a restraining order. Her behavior is escalating, and the threats about challenging your competency cross the line from harassment to potential elder abuse. I agreed to pursue the restraining order. Vanessa had made it clear that she wasn't going to accept defeat gracefully. If anything, losing Marcus and facing eviction seemed to be making her more desperate and dangerous. As I prepared for bed that night, I felt simultaneously exhausted and energized. The past week had been emotionally draining, but I'd also never felt more powerful or in control of my own life. For the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for someone else's permission to protect myself. Vanessa had underestimated me, assuming I would be passive and compliant in the face of her abuse. She was about to learn that some battles aren't worth starting, especially when your opponent has nothing left to lose and everything to protect. Monday morning arrived with the kind of sharp November chill that made Cedar Falls feel like the frontier town it had once been. I was sipping my first cup of coffee when I heard the unmistakable sound of a diesel engine pulling into my driveway. Through the kitchen window, I watched as a sheriff's deputy climbed out of his patrol car and walked toward my front door. Deputy Michael Chen was a soft-spoken man in his 40s who'd handled the restraining order paperwork with professional efficiency. I'd met with him Friday afternoon to file the necessary documents, providing copies of all my evidence against Vanessa's harassment campaign. Mrs. Carter, I wanted to update you on the restraining order status, he said when I opened the door. Judge Morrison approved the temporary order this morning. Mrs. Rodriguez has been served and is required to maintain at least 500 feet distance from you, your property, and your workplace. How did she react to being served? Deputy Chen's expression remained neutral, but I caught a flicker of something that might have been amusement. She was quite vocal about her displeasure, claimed the whole thing was based on lies and harassment from you. She also insisted that she had legal rights to challenge what she called your obviously compromised mental state. Even when being served with a restraining order, Vanessa couldn't resist making threats about my competency. It was becoming her signature move, like a poker player who couldn't help but telegraph their bluffs. Did she say anything else? She demanded to know who was helping you with legal advice, and she made some statements about exposing the conspiracy against her. Mrs. Carter, I have to ask, do you have security cameras on your property? The question sent a chill down my spine. No, I don't. Should I? Given her statements about gathering evidence and her pattern of escalating behavior, it might be wise. People who feel cornered sometimes make poor choices about surveillance and trespassing. I made a mental note to call a security company that afternoon. The idea of Vanessa lurking around my property taking photos or video was deeply unsettling, but it was exactly the kind of boundary violation she seemed capable of. After Deputy Chen left, I drove to Gerald's office for our scheduled appointment to finalize my estate planning documents. The cognitive assessment Dr. Williams had arranged was scheduled for that afternoon, creating a timeline that would establish my mental competency before any challenges could be raised. Gerald's office felt like a sanctuary of order and reason. He'd prepared 3 separate documents for my signature: the revised will with no contest clauses, a comprehensive living trust, and updated healthcare directives with very specific instructions about decision-making authority. Ruth, I want to walk through each provision carefully so you understand exactly what protections we've built in, Gerald said, spreading the documents across his conference table. The new will included language that specifically addressed harassment and abuse. Any beneficiary who engaged in threatening behavior, made false reports about my mental health, or attempted to challenge my competency without legitimate medical evidence would forfeit their inheritance rights entirely. This clause has some real teeth, Gerald explained. If Vanessa convinces Marcus to support a competency challenge, he could lose his inheritance even if the challenge fails. The living trust was even more comprehensive, removing my assets from probate and creating a structure that would be extremely difficult to challenge. The trust included provisions for my care if I ever did become incapacitated, but required agreement from multiple independent parties rather than relying on family members who might have conflicts of interest. The healthcare directives are crucial, Gerald continued. They explicitly state your wishes about medical decision-making and name specific people who are authorized to make decisions if you become unable to do so. Vanessa and anyone acting on her behalf are specifically excluded from any medical authority. I signed all the documents with a sense of profound relief. For the first time since discovering Vanessa's harassment campaign, I felt truly protected. She could threaten and scheme all she wanted, but the legal protections were now in place. That afternoon, Dr. Williams conducted the most thorough cognitive assessment I'd ever experienced. Memory tests, problem-solving exercises, psychological evaluations, everything designed to establish a comprehensive baseline of my mental functioning. "Ruth, your results are well within normal ranges for someone your age," Dr. Williams told me as we finished. "In fact, your cognitive flexibility and executive function scores are above average. If anyone challenges your competency, this assessment will provide strong evidence of your mental acuity." Dr. Williams also provided me with copies of my complete medical records, highlighting my excellent physical and mental health. She'd included a detailed letter explaining the harassment campaign and her professional opinion that my decision-making was completely sound. Tuesday brought an unexpected phone call from Marcus's divorce attorney, Robert Steinberg. He was calling to discuss strategy for the divorce proceedings, but he had concerning news about Vanessa's legal representation. "Mrs. Carter, I wanted to make you aware that Mrs. Rodriguez has retained Jennifer Walsh as her divorce attorney. Walsh has a reputation for aggressive tactics and scorched-earth approaches to family law cases." I recognized the name from newspaper articles about high-profile divorce cases in Des Moines. Jennifer Walsh was known for her willingness to use any available weapon against opposing parties, including character assassination and frivolous legal challenges. What does this mean for Marcus's case? It means we should expect Mrs. Rodriguez to fight dirty. Walsh will likely try to paint Marcus as being manipulated by you, and she may attempt to challenge your mental state as part of her strategy to maximize her client's settlement. This confirmed my worst fears about Vanessa's plans. She wasn't just fighting for financial support in the divorce. She was preparing to wage war against my entire family. "Mr. Steinberg, I have comprehensive documentation of Mrs. Rodriguez's harassment campaign against me, including threats about challenging my competency. Would this be relevant to Marcus's case?" "Absolutely. If we can establish a pattern of manipulative and abusive behavior, it strengthens Marcus's position significantly. Can you send me copies of your documentation?" I spent that evening organizing my evidence files for Marcus's attorney. Screenshots, police reports, medical records, witness statements from Jennifer Rodriguez. Everything that demonstrated Vanessa's calculated cruelty and her escalating threats. Wednesday morning brought the security system installation. 2 technicians from Cedar Valley Security spent 3 hours installing cameras around my property perimeter, motion sensors near the garage apartment, and a comprehensive monitoring system in my house. "Mrs. Carter, these cameras will capture everything within a 100-foot radius of your house," the lead technician explained. "The system automatically uploads to cloud storage, so even if someone damages the equipment, the recordings are preserved." The timing proved prescient. That afternoon, while I was grocery shopping, my phone buzzed with a security alert. The motion sensors had detected someone in my backyard near the garage apartment. I pulled up the camera feed on my phone app and watched as Vanessa crept around the building, peering into windows and trying door handles. She was clearly violating the restraining order, but more importantly, she was trespassing and potentially attempting to break into the apartment. I called 911 immediately, giving the dispatcher my address and explaining that someone was violating a restraining order and trespassing on my property. Deputy Chen arrived within 10 minutes, but Vanessa was gone by then. However, the security cameras had captured everything in high definition. We watched the footage together on my laptop, documenting her systematic attempt to enter the garage apartment. She's testing locks, checking windows, and looking for ways to get inside, Deputy Chen observed. This goes beyond simple trespassing. She's attempting to commit breaking and entering. What are my options? We can arrest her for violating the restraining order and add charges for attempted burglary. But, Mrs. Carter, I'm concerned about her escalating behavior. People don't usually progress from online harassment to attempted break-ins unless they're planning something more serious. The implications were terrifying. If Vanessa was desperate enough to break into my property while under a restraining order, what would she try next? I think we need to consider the possibility that she's looking for evidence to support a competency challenge, I said. Medical records, financial documents, anything she could use to paint me as confused or incompetent. Deputy Chen nodded grimly. That would explain the systematic way she was checking entry points. She wasn't looking to steal random items, she was looking for specific information. That evening, I received a call from Jennifer Walsh's office. The secretary informed me that Walsh was representing Vanessa Rodriguez in divorce proceedings and potential elder abuse allegations. They were requesting copies of my medical records, financial statements, and any medications I was currently taking. I politely declined and referred them to Gerald's office. The fact that they were already talking about elder abuse allegations confirmed that Vanessa was preparing to flip the script, portraying herself as the victim trying to protect an elderly woman from her own poor judgment. Thursday morning brought a visit from Adult Protective Services. A social worker named Patricia Moore appeared at my door with a clipboard and a concerned expression. Mrs. Carter, we received a report of potential elder abuse and self-neglect. I'm here to conduct a welfare check and assess your living situation. My heart sank. Vanessa had played her trump card, filing a false report with APS to create official documentation of concerns about my welfare. It was exactly the kind of manipulative tactic I'd been expecting. Ms. Moore, I believe this report was filed by someone who has been harassing me for months. I have extensive documentation of her threats and abusive behavior. I invited Ms. Moore inside and showed her my house, my medical records, and my documentation of Vanessa's harassment campaign. Ms. Moore was thorough but professional, clearly experienced in distinguishing between legitimate concerns and manufactured complaints. Mrs. Carter, your home is clean and well-maintained. You appear to be in excellent health, and your mental functioning seems completely normal. Ms. Moore concluded. Can you tell me more about who might have filed this report? I explained Vanessa's campaign against me, including her research into elder abuse tactics and her threats about challenging my competency. Ms. Moore took detailed notes and asked for copies of my evidence. Unfortunately, we see this kind of false reporting more often than we'd like, Ms. Moore said. Adult children or relatives sometimes try to use our agency as a weapon in family disputes or financial conflicts. Ms. Moore's report would actually work in my favor, creating official documentation that I was competent, well cared for, and living independently without any legitimate concerns about abuse or neglect. That afternoon, Gerald called with an update on the legal situation. Jennifer Walsh had filed motions requesting access to my medical records and financial information as part of the divorce proceedings. She was claiming that Marcus's inheritance expectations were relevant to the property. Division. This is a fishing expedition, Gerald explained. Walsh is hoping to find something she can use to challenge your competency or paint you as an unreliable witness. But she's overreaching. Your medical records and estate planning aren't relevant to Marcus and Vanessa's divorce. What happens? If the judge grants her request, we'll fight it vigorously. You have privacy rights, and there's no legitimate legal basis for Walsh to access your personal information. But Ruth, this confirms that they're building toward a competency challenge. Friday brought the news I'd been dreading. Marcus called to tell me that Vanessa had filed for legal separation instead of divorce, claiming she needed time to protect her husband from his mother's psychological manipulation. She's claiming that you've brainwashed me against her, Marcus said, his voice tight with anger. Her lawyer is arguing that our marriage can be saved once I'm free from your undue influence. This was a clever legal strategy. By claiming psychological manipulation rather than accepting that Marcus had made his own decision based on evidence, Vanessa could position herself as the victim while painting me as the abuser. Marcus, how are you handling this? I'm furious. Mom? She's trying to make it seem like I'm not capable of making my own decisions about my marriage. It's insulting and manipulative, just like everything else she's done. What does your lawyer say? He says it's a delay tactic. She's hoping that if she can drag this out long enough, I'll get tired of fighting and agree to a settlement that gives her more money. He also thinks she's hoping to gather evidence for a competency challenge against you. That weekend, I received an unexpected visitor. Helen from next door came over Saturday morning with fresh-baked muffins and a worried expression. Ruth, I hate to bother you with this, but I've been seeing some strange activity around your garage apartment at night. Someone with a flashlight, walking around the building and looking in windows. My blood ran cold. Despite the restraining order and the attempted burglary charges, Vanessa was still coming onto my property under cover of darkness. When did you see this? 3 times this week. Always after midnight. Always someone in dark clothing with a small flashlight. I called the police the first time, but by the time they arrived, whoever it was had left. I showed Helen the security footage from earlier in the week, and she confirmed that it was the same person she'd seen. Vanessa was systematically surveilling my property, looking for weaknesses in my security or opportunities to gather evidence. Helen, I need to ask you a favor. Would you be willing to keep a written log of any suspicious activity you see? Dates, times, descriptions, anything that might help establish a pattern. Of course, dear. And Ruth, I want you to know that several of us neighbors have been talking. We're all keeping an eye on your place, and we're prepared to testify about this woman's behavior if needed. The support from my neighbors was touching and reassuring. Vanessa had underestimated the community bonds in our quiet neighborhood. Her harassment campaign wasn't happening in isolation. It was being witnessed and documented by multiple people who cared about my welfare. Sunday evening brought a phone call that changed everything. Jennifer Rodriguez called from Phoenix, her voice tight with controlled fury. Ruth, I just got off the phone with a private investigator who claims to be working for Vanessa's divorce attorney. He was asking questions about your mental health, your relationship with Marcus, and whether I'd noticed any concerning changes in your behavior. What did you tell him? I told him that you seemed perfectly rational and competent, and that the only concerning behavior I'd witnessed was from his client. But Ruth, this means they're building a case against you. They're interviewing people who know you, looking for anyone who might support a competency challenge. This escalation was both predictable and alarming. Vanessa wasn't content to simply harass me directly. She was now actively trying to recruit witnesses to support her claims about my mental state. Jennifer, did the investigator ask about anything specific? He wanted to know if you'd made any unusual financial decisions, if you seemed confused about family relationships, or if you'd expressed paranoid thoughts about being threatened. He was clearly fishing for evidence of cognitive decline or mental illness. The fact that they were focusing on my financial decisions suggested they knew about my estate planning changes. Someone had leaked information about my revised will and trust arrangements. Ruth, there's something else. The investigator mentioned that they'd been in contact with some of your neighbors and healthcare providers. They're conducting a comprehensive investigation of your life and relationships. I felt a chill of violation and anger. Vanessa and her attorney were essentially stalking me, interviewing anyone who had access to information about my personal life. It was an invasion of privacy that went far beyond normal divorce proceedings. Jennifer, I think it's time to go on the offensive. They're escalating this conflict, and I need to be prepared to fight back. What do you have in mind? I'm going to make sure that anyone they interview knows the truth about Vanessa's harassment campaign. And I'm going to start documenting every attempt they make to gather information about me. That night, I called Gerald and explained the latest developments. We scheduled an emergency meeting for Monday morning to discuss counter strategies and additional legal protections. Ruth, they're trying to build a narrative that you're an unstable elderly woman who's manipulating her son and making irrational decisions, Gerald said. We need to get ahead of this story and control the narrative ourselves. I agreed completely. Vanessa had started this war, but I was going to finish it on my terms. 3 months later, I was sitting in my sunny kitchen reading the morning paper when my phone buzzed with a news alert. Local woman faces charges in elder abuse scam, the headline read. The article detailed how Vanessa Rodriguez had been arrested for filing false reports, harassment, and attempted fraud against multiple elderly residents in Cedar Falls. It turned out I wasn't her only target. The private investigator she'd hired had discovered her pattern of befriending older adults, researching their finances, and then launching harassment campaigns designed to isolate them from family support. She'd attempted similar schemes with 2 other widows in town before targeting me. Marcus called an hour later, his voice lighter than it had been in months. Mom, did you see the news? The police found evidence that she'd been planning this for over a year. She had files on you, Mrs. Henderson from Maple Street, and that retired teacher, Mrs. Chang. The final irony came when Vanessa's own lawyer dropped her case after discovering she'd lied about her financial situation and criminal background. Jennifer Walsh publicly stated that she'd been deceived about the true nature of the case. Today, I'm living peacefully in my home, my relationships with Marcus and Jennifer Rodriguez stronger than ever. My estate planning remains unchanged. My assets will support veterans organizations and women's empowerment programs that helped me find my voice. The garage apartment now houses a young military family getting back on their feet, people who treat my generosity with genuine gratitude rather than entitlement. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and protecting what matters most. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Share your own experiences with toxic family members in the comments below. You're not alone, and your voice matters. Remember, setting boundaries isn't cruel. It's necessary for your peace and dignity.